Hey guys, I've been doing a Bible study that kind of is really eye-opening to me, and I've always been curious, especially lately while I've been studying, as to what Jesus wrote on the ground with his finger in the temple. Um, it's always been, I never knew it was in Scripture. I believe I found it's in Scripture what he wrote. Um, so I'm going to begin reading in John chapter 8, verse 1. This is the when the Pharisees brought the adulterous woman to Jesus, testing Jesus to see what he would do. I'll read the kind of the text verse first, and then we'll backtrack and reference with scripture and see just what Jesus wrote. Because it's interesting to me, because it's the only time I see in scripture that he wrote anything. He wrote with his finger on the ground twice in this scene. So John chapter 8 verse 1, Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery, and when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. They're looking for a reason to accuse Jesus of not being the Messiah, because they don't believe. But Jesus stooped down. He's sitting in the temple. He stooped down, and with his finger wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. He heard them, but he instead of answering them verbally, he went down and started writing on the ground. So when they continued asking him, they're almost mocking at this point, if not mocking at this point. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. So it looked like, to me, it looks like he's answering them by what he's writing on the ground, because he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted himself up, almost like showing them what he's writing, and then told him, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And then again he stooped and continued writing. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, meaning whatever he's writing is putting them in under conviction. That's not normal for the Pharisees. The Pharisees normally would rebuke and mock back and come back at him, but whatever he wrote was powerful because it convicted them. And they which heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one. They just left. They were so under conviction that they didn't have words to say to Jesus. So what was so powerful that he wrote on the ground? It's been speculated on before. I've heard different things. But nothing confirmed in scripture. I believe I found something interesting. If you go back to the day before, when Jesus was teaching, and the Pharisees always sent spies out to try to catch Jesus in a lie or catch Jesus in something. Obviously they never would, but Nicodemus was one of the famous ones that's named quite a few times. He was at the sermon the night before, and that sermon in John 7, in verse 37 and 38, in the last day of the feast, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believeth on me, as the scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Now, anytime Jesus says, as the scripture has said, he quoted scripture quite a bit. Obviously, he's talking about the Old Testament. The New Testament wasn't written yet. They were living in the New Testament time. So anytime he says, as the scripture has said, you should really backtrack and try to find the reference there. And we'll get back to that. But later on, so when Nicodemus and the other Pharisees come to report to the elders, down in verse 45 we'll start. Then came the officers to the chief priests and Pharisees, and they said unto them, Why have ye not brought him? They wanted them to capture Jesus and something. And the officers answered, Never man spake like this man. So obviously these men are under conviction as well of what Jesus was teaching. Then answered them the Pharisees, Are ye also deceived? So the leaders are saying, What, has he got you guys deceived too? What is going on? Have any of the rulers or of the Pharisees believed on him? But this people who knoweth not the law are cursed. Nicodemus saith unto them, Nicodemus was there, listen to the message, he that came to Jesus by night, being one of them. And this is the verse that stood out to me, that really got me studying. Verse 51, Nicodemus talking, saith, Doth our law judge any man before it hear him, and know what he doeth? What he's saying is, this man Jesus knows our past, knows it. Obviously, Jesus at some point told Nicodemus something he did in his past that Nicodemus didn't know anybody else knew, because the way it seems like Nicodemus is starting to believe, and this is why, doth our law, so he's saying our law can't judge my past, but this man can. There's something different about this man. It says, I'll read it again, doth our law judge any man before it hear him, and know what he doeth? So before Jesus ever heard Nicodemus, he already knew what he did. That's pretty powerful, and that's why Nicodemus was under conviction and starting to believe. Let me go back now to 37 and 38. What Jesus was preaching about, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believeth on me, as the scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. So let's see where in the scripture Jesus is speaking of. Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, it's an awesome book. Chapter 17, and in verse 13, O Lord, the hope of Israel, all that forsake thee shall be ashamed, and they that depart from me shall be written in the earth, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters. Now, what did Jesus just get done speaking to the Pharisees about, and to the crowd about, is that he was the living waters. And here in Jeremiah, it's saying, I'll read it again. O Lord, the hope of Israel, all that forsake thee shall be ashamed, and they that depart from me shall be written in the earth, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters. So it's saying what will be written in the earth are the ones that have forsaken the living waters. So the ones that are not turning to the living waters, it says God's going to write their name in the earth. And that's what Jesus did in the temple. He's writing on the floor to the Pharisees, the ones that are forsaking the living waters. It's pretty powerful stuff. I think what he was writing is, if you take a second personally, and just picture something that you've done in your past, a sin, we've all sinned, something you've done in your past that you don't think anybody else knows about, that's something so awful that you just wish you could have a second chance at, that you wish you never did it. If you picture that moment, I believe that's what Jesus was doing with these Pharisees. He's writing their name down in the dust on the floor, and he's probably writing that sin, or a couple sins that they didn't think any other human being knew about. And that's why they were so under conviction. I mean, you can say I'm wrong, but the Bible seems pretty clear to me on that. If we go back to the original passage, John chapter 8. And if you think I'm wrong, please comment on the video and show me where I'm wrong. I want to know. I'm humble. I don't claim to know everything. I'm learning. I'm trying to learn. This stood out to me. Again, we'll skip down to the part where Jesus is writing in the dirt. So when they continued asking him, he lifted himself up and said unto them, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And if we keep reading there, and let's say I'm right on this, and that's what he wrote. He wrote their name, and he wrote the sins that they didn't think anybody else knew, just like Nicodemus testified that he did the night before to them, to the same people. That would be pretty powerful. That would put you under conviction. And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last, and Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. So they all left. When Jesus had lifted up himself, and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee, go and sin no more. Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting study, and I'm not done studying. I actually got a part 2 of this coming out about why I believe the Pharisees didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah, and it's out of the same passage. Actually, we'll go a little further next time, but I hope y'all get something out of that. It touched me. Thanks. Talk to you later.